There exists a dimension of influence so profound, so utterly commanding, that those who possess it need never raise their voice to be heard, never flex their might to be obeyed, never explain themselves to be understood. Machiavelli knew this truth intimately, observing from the corridors of Renaissance Florence how true power operates not through thunderous declarations, but through silent mastery, not through visible force, but through invisible control. What if the greatest manifestation of dominance you could ever achieve exists not in what you show the world, but in what you deliberately conceal? What if the very act of restraint, of calculated silence, of strategic invisibility, holds more transformative potential than any display of strength could ever command? Throughout history, the princes who endured, the rulers who shaped nations, the architects of destiny who bent reality to their vision, were never those who shouted loudest or struck most visibly. They were the ones who understood a paradox that eludes most seekers of influence: that true power diminishes in proportion to its display, that authority grows in the shadows of discretion, that command becomes absolute only when it operates beneath the surface of perception. The world celebrates the loud, rewards the visible, applauses the obvious, yet it is governed by those who master the art of silent operation. Those who understand that the hand which moves unseen moves nations, that the voice which whispers shapes empires more effectively than the one which roars. Consider for a moment the architecture of genuine influence in your own existence. When have you felt most powerless? Was it not precisely in those moments when you desperately needed others to acknowledge your worth, when you craved validation, when you sought permission to act according to your own judgment? And conversely, when have you experienced your deepest sense of authority? Was it not in those instances when you needed nothing from anyone, when your sense of purpose originated entirely from within, when your actions required no external justification whatsoever? This is the threshold Machiavelli invites us to cross, the transformation from seeking power in the eyes of others to cultivating it in the invisible chambers of our own sovereignty. The teaching you are about to receive concerns a singular level of consciousness, one specific dimension of psychological development that, once achieved, radiates an influence so natural, so undeniable, that it requires neither announcement nor demonstration. This is not about manipulating perception or crafting an image of strength. This is about becoming so fundamentally centered in your own authority that the world around you reorganizes itself in response to your presence without you uttering a single directive. Machiavelli observed this principle in the great political minds of his era, noting how certain leaders commanded absolute loyalty, not through threats or promises, but through an unmistakable quality that emanated from their very being, a quality that said without words, "Here stands someone who has transcended the need for your approval." And in that transcendence lies their ultimate power over circumstance. What you will discover in the architecture of this teaching is not a technique to be practiced, but a transformation to be undergone. Not a mask to wear, but a reality to inhabit. Not a strategy to deploy, but a state of being to embody. The journey begins with understanding why the vast majority of people, despite their ambitions and efforts, remain perpetually trapped in cycles of visible striving and invisible powerlessness, while a rare few ascend to that singular level where their influence becomes as silent as it is absolute, as invisible as it is undeniable. Prepare yourself to question everything you have been taught about strength, authority, and the true nature of command. For Machiavelli's wisdom cuts through comfortable illusions to reveal the uncomfortable truth about where real power actually resides. The first revelation that must penetrate your consciousness concerns the fundamental deception that governs most human pursuits of influence. Machiavelli understood through decades of observing political theatre that what appears as power to the undiscerning eye is often its precise opposite, that the pageantry of authority frequently masks the desperation of those who possess none. Watch carefully how those who feel most powerless behave. They announce their intentions loudly, they broadcast their achievements constantly, they demand recognition perpetually, they insist upon their importance relentlessly. This is not strength manifesting, but weakness advertising itself. Not authority expressing itself, but insecurity seeking validation through external acknowledgement. The marketplace of human interaction rewards visibility in the short term, creating a seductive trap that captures most seekers of influence. Social mechanisms have evolved to favor those who perform confidence over those who possess it, those who display knowledge over those who embody wisdom, those who project strength over those who have cultivated actual power. Yet Machiavelli reminds us that history belongs not to the performers, but to those who understand the performance. Not to those who play the game loudly, but to those who master its hidden rules silently. The prince, who must constantly remind his subjects of his authority, has already lost it, while the one whose mere presence commands respect without a word has achieved something far more profound. Consider the architecture of genuine versus superficial power in the natural world itself. The sun does not announce its rising, the ocean does not proclaim its depth, the mountain does not justify its height. These forces of nature command respect through their sheer being, not through their declarations. Human power, when it achieves its highest expression, operates on this same principle. The individual who has reached that singular level of silent power does not need to convince anyone of anything, because their internal state of mastery communicates itself through channels that bypass verbal explanation entirely. Their certainty is so complete that it creates certainty in others, their authority so natural that resistance to it feels unnatural, their command so implicit that obedience to it seems like the most reasonable response imaginable. The trap that ensnares most people attempting to cultivate influence lies in their fundamental misunderstanding of power's source. They believe power comes from others, from recognition, from status, from titles, from visible achievements that can be pointed to and counted. This belief creates an endless hunger that can never be satisfied because it places the source of your authority outside yourself, in the hands of people and circumstances you cannot control. Machiavelli saw through this illusion completely. He recognized that those who derive their sense of power from external validation are at the mercy of every opinion, vulnerable to every criticism, dependent upon maintaining an exhausting performance that can never cease. They become slaves to the very audience they believe they command. The transformation begins when you grasp a truth so simple yet so revolutionary that it restructures your entire relationship with influence. Authentic power is not gained from the world, but brought to it. You do not accumulate power by winning the approval of others. You reveal the power that already exists within you by ceasing to require their approval at all. This is the doorway to that singular level Machiavelli understood so well, the threshold where your relationship with authority fundamentally inverts. Instead of seeking permission to be powerful, you grant permission to others to recognize what you already are. Instead of building power through external accomplishments, you express through external actions the internal mastery you have already achieved. This first understanding demolishes the foundation upon which most people construct their entire approach to influence. It explains why the loudest voices in any room are rarely the most powerful ones, why those who speak least often carry the most weight, why leaders who feel no need to defend their position hold it most securely. The visible display of power is inversely proportional to the actual possession of it. Those who have it need not show it. Those who lack it cannot help but advertise their lack through the very intensity of their displays. This principle operates in every domain of human interaction, from personal relationships to professional hierarchies to political structures. Master this first revelation, and you have taken the initial step toward that singular level where your influence becomes silent, absolute, and utterly undeniable. The question that should be forming in your consciousness now is this: if visible displays of power indicate its absence rather than its presence, what does genuine power actually look like? How does it manifest? How does it operate? What are its characteristics? These questions guide us toward the second revelation, toward understanding not what power is not, but what it actually is, when stripped of all theatrical pretense and social performance. Machiavelli provides the answer through observation of those rare individuals who transcended the need for validation, and in doing so, achieved a form of influence that operated through presence rather than performance, through being rather than doing, through silent mastery rather than loud demonstration. The second revelation concerns the actual structure of power when it exists in its authentic form, undiluted by the need for external validation. Machiavelli recognized that true authority begins not with control over others, but with absolute command over oneself, not with the ability to influence external circumstances, but with mastery of internal states. The prince who cannot govern his own emotions, impulses, fears, and desires has no business attempting to govern a state. The individual who remains slave to their own reactions, opinions, moods, and needs can never become master of their circumstances, regardless of how much external power they appear to wield. Internal sovereignty means establishing within yourself a center of gravity so absolute that nothing external can destabilize it. This is not the false stability of rigidity or the brittle composure of suppression. It is the dynamic equilibrium of someone who has done the profound work of integrating their shadow, understanding their motivations, accepting their nature, and aligning their actions with principles that originate from within rather than being imposed from without. When you achieve this state, you become psychologically immune to the primary weapons that others use to control behavior: approval and disapproval, praise and criticism, inclusion and exclusion. These social currencies that govern most human behavior lose their power over someone who has established their own internal standard of worth. Machiavelli observed that the most effective rulers were those who could maintain their strategic vision regardless of whether they were being celebrated or condemned, regardless of whether fortune smiled upon them or circumstances turned hostile. This consistency did not come from stubbornness or rigidity, but from a profound inner knowing that their value, their purpose, their direction came from within, and therefore could not be granted or removed by external forces. They had achieved what few people ever achieve: the ability to remain psychologically sovereign regardless of social pressure, emotional manipulation, or circumstantial chaos. This internal sovereignty manifested as a kind of psychological gravity that drew others into orbit around them, not through force, but through the sheer stability of their center. The cultivation of this internal sovereignty requires confronting and integrating aspects of yourself that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. It demands that you face your fears without flinching, acknowledge your desires without shame, accept your limitations without diminishment, and own your power without apology. This process is uncomfortable precisely because it strips away the comfortable fictions most people use to navigate social reality. You can no longer blame circumstances for your condition, credit luck for your achievements, or attribute your choices to forces beyond your control. You become the conscious author of your existence, and with that authorship comes a weight of responsibility that many find too heavy to bear. Yet those who complete this alchemical transformation discover something remarkable. The very weight they feared would crush them becomes the anchor that stabilizes them. The responsibility they thought would imprison them becomes the freedom they always sought. When you stop looking outside yourself for permission, validation, direction, or worth, you discover reserves of power you never knew existed. You find that you can make decisions without consensus, take action without approval, change direction without explanation, and maintain your course without external reinforcement. This is not arrogance or isolation. It is the emergence of authentic autonomy, the birth of genuine self-determination. Machiavelli would recognize in this state the foundation upon which all enduring power must be built. Without internal sovereignty, any external power you accumulate remains vulnerable to the shifting winds of fortune, opinion, and circumstance. With internal sovereignty established, you become like a mountain that weathers every storm, not by resisting the wind, but by being so fundamentally grounded that no wind can move you. Others sense this quality immediately, though they may not consciously understand what they are sensing. They perceive someone who does not need them, does not fear them, does not require their approval. Yet paradoxically, this very independence makes you more influential, more magnetic, more compelling than any desperate attempt at impression management ever could. The paradox deepens when you realize that internal sovereignty does not lead to isolation, but to more authentic connection, not to indifference, but to more genuine care, not to withdrawal, but to more effective engagement with the world. When you no longer need specific outcomes from interactions, you can engage with people and situations more honestly, more directly, more powerfully. Your lack of neediness removes the distortion that desperation introduces into every exchange. You can speak truth without fear of rejection, make requests without fear of refusal, offer value without requiring reciprocation. This is the freedom that internal sovereignty grants, and it is this freedom that others perceive as power, as authority, as that quality that commands respect without demanding it. The third revelation illuminates why needlessness constitutes the foundation of silent power, and how cultivating it transforms your entire relationship with influence. Machiavelli understood profoundly that the moment you need something from someone, they acquire power over you. And the moment you release that need, you reclaim that power. This principle operates with mathematical precision across every domain of human interaction. The employee who desperately needs to keep their job grants their employer absolute power over them. The lover who cannot imagine life without their partner surrenders all leverage in the relationship. The leader who requires the approval of followers becomes their prisoner rather than their guide. Observe carefully how need manifests in human behavior, and you will see power draining away in real time. Need makes you predictable, and predictability removes mystery, which is one of power's essential ingredients. Need makes you controllable, because those who understand your needs can manipulate you by threatening to withhold what you crave or promising to provide it. Need makes you vulnerable, because your well-being becomes dependent upon variables you cannot control. Need makes you desperate, and desperation is the opposite of the calm certainty that characterizes genuine authority. Every negotiation you enter with need, visible tilts the power dynamic against you before a single word is spoken. The cultivation of psychological needlessness does not mean becoming emotionally detached or strategically cold. It means developing such abundance within yourself that you engage with the world from a position of overflow rather than deficit. When you need nothing from an interaction, you can be present to its actual content rather than to your agenda. When you require nothing from a person, you can see them clearly rather than through the distorting lens of what you hope to extract from them. When you depend upon nothing from an outcome, you can act with the boldness and creativity that self-preservation inhibits. This state of needlessness, paradoxically, makes you far more effective at achieving outcomes precisely because you are not attached to them. Machiavelli would point to the strategic advantage that needlessness provides in any power dynamic. The prince who needs to be loved by his subjects will make different choices than the one who prefers to be loved, but is perfectly prepared to be feared if circumstances require it. The negotiator who needs the deal will accept terms that the one with alternatives would reject. The individual who needs to be right will defend positions that the one seeking truth would abandon upon receiving better information. Need blinds you to reality, constrains your options, and forces you into patterns of behavior that serve your psychological requirements rather than your strategic interests. The transformation from neediness to needlessness occurs not through denial or suppression, but through cultivation. You become psychologically needless by developing such internal resources that external circumstances cannot threaten your fundamental stability. You achieve emotional needlessness by processing your wounds and integrating your shadows so completely that you no longer require others to fill voids within yourself. You attain strategic needlessness by creating multiple options, developing diverse capabilities, and maintaining various pathways forward so that no single outcome determines your fate. This is practical power building, not positive thinking or spiritual bypass. The observable effect of cultivating needlessness manifests in how others respond to your presence. When you enter a room needing nothing from anyone in it, people sense something different about you. They cannot consciously articulate what they perceive, but they respond to it nonetheless. The usual social dynamics that govern most interactions do not apply to you because you are not playing by the same rules. You are not competing for attention, not seeking validation, not positioning yourself relative to others. This very absence of typical social striving creates a vacuum that draws attention naturally, effortlessly, inevitably. You become interesting precisely because you are not trying to be interesting, influential precisely because you are not trying to influence. Machiavelli recognized this phenomenon in the most effective political operators of his time. They possessed a quality of psychological independence that made them simultaneously more trustworthy and more dangerous than others. More trustworthy because they were not driven by desperate need and therefore less likely to betray principles for immediate gain. More dangerous because they could not be controlled through the usual levers of need, desire, fear, and ambition that regulate most human behavior. They had achieved that singular level where their power came not from what they could get from others, but from what they no longer needed from anyone, including from themselves. The fourth revelation exposes the actual mechanisms through which silent power operates, how influence flows without words, how authority commands without speaking. Machiavelli observed that the most consequential communications often occur beneath the level of explicit speech, through channels that bypass conscious awareness and speak directly to instinct, intuition, and pattern recognition. Your physical presence, your emotional state, your energetic quality, all broadcast information continuously. And those around you receive and respond to these transmissions, whether they consciously recognize them or not. The individual who has achieved internal sovereignty and psychological needlessness emanates a frequency that others cannot help but perceive and respond to. Consider what actually happens in moments of genuine authority. A parent enters a room where children are misbehaving, and without a word being spoken, the atmosphere shifts. A teacher looks at a disruptive student and silence returns. A leader stands before a crowd and attention focuses. These moments of wordless command reveal power operating through presence rather than speech, through being rather than doing. The transmission occurs through hundreds of microsignals: posture, breathing, facial expression, eye contact, energy, and something deeper still that we sense but cannot name. These signals communicate whether someone is centered or scattered, certain or doubtful, sovereign or seeking approval, dangerous or safe. Machiavelli understood that those who have achieved that singular level of silent power develop an unmistakable quality of presence that communicates authority without assertion. They do not need to announce their competence because competence radiates from them. They do not need to demand respect because something in their carriage makes disrespect feel inappropriate. They do not need to threaten consequences because the seriousness with which they hold themselves makes frivolity in their presence seem out of place. This is not intimidation or aggression. It is the natural effect of someone who has done the internal work of integration and sovereignty, manifesting that work in the external world. The mechanics of this silent influence operate through what might be called congruence. Every aspect of the individual aligns. Their words match their thoughts. Their actions reflect their values. Their external presentation corresponds to their internal reality. This alignment creates a kind of psychological coherence that others perceive as authenticity, and authenticity generates trust at a level that transcends rational evaluation. We are biologically programmed to detect incongruence, to sense when someone's surface presentation does not match their internal state. Actors train for years to eliminate these tells, yet even the best performance cannot fully hide the signals of internal conflict or inauthenticity. The person who has achieved true internal sovereignty does not need to perform, because there is no gap between what they are and what they present. This congruence manifests in countless subtle ways that accumulate into overwhelming effect. The timing of their responses reveals someone who is not anxiously rushing to fill silence or defensively countering criticism. The quality of their listening demonstrates someone present rather than merely waiting to speak. The steadiness of their emotional state shows someone not dependent upon external validation for internal stability. The clarity of their communication reflects someone who knows what they think and feels no need to obscure it in social niceties or strategic ambiguity. Each of these small signals contributes to an overall impression of someone who has transcended the usual games of social positioning. Machiavelli would note that this silent influence becomes most apparent in moments of crisis or conflict. When pressure increases, most people reveal their neediness through anxiety, aggression, or supplication. They either attack, defend, or appease, all responses that communicate powerlessness dressed in the costume of power. The individual operating from silent power responds differently. They remain calm, not because they are suppressing emotion, but because their internal state is not dependent upon external circumstances. They assess situations clearly rather than reactively. They make decisions based on strategic assessment rather than emotional urgency. This capacity to remain centered when others are destabilizing generates enormous influence because people naturally look to whoever maintains stability when chaos threatens. The cultivation of this silent influence requires that you develop acute awareness of your own internal state and how it broadcasts externally. You must learn to recognize when neediness is operating beneath your conscious awareness. When fear is driving choices you tell yourself are strategic. When ego is compelling behaviors you rationalize as necessary. This internal work never ends because new layers of conditioning and shadow continuously reveal themselves as you grow. Yet each level of integration enhances the congruence that generates silent power. Each transformation of internal state produces corresponding shifts in how others perceive and respond to your presence. You become a kind of tuning fork, and the frequency you emanate determines the frequency others will resonate with when in your vicinity. The fifth revelation illuminates perhaps the most counterintuitive principle in Machiavelli's understanding of power, that true authority grows not through expansion, but through strategic contraction, not through doing more, but through doing less, not through showing everything you can do, but through revealing only what serves your purpose. The amateur seeks every opportunity to demonstrate competence, taking every chance to speak, to act, to show their capabilities. The master understands that power accumulates in restraint, that mystery multiplies influence, that what you choose not to reveal often matters more than what you display. Watch how those who feel insecure about their position behave. They over-explain their decisions, justify their actions, defend their choices, prove their worth. Every word they speak, every explanation they offer, every justification they provide diminishes them. They are teaching others that their authority requires explanation, that their decisions need justification, that their worth must be proven. This pattern establishes a precedent where others come to expect and demand accounting, where the individual must continuously re-establish their legitimacy, where power must be performed rather than simply possessed. Machiavelli saw clearly that this trap captures most seekers of influence, creating an exhausting cycle where they must constantly work to maintain what should simply be. The antidote lies in cultivating strategic restraint across multiple dimensions. Verbal restraint means speaking less and ensuring that when you do speak, your words carry weight. When you speak rarely, people listen carefully. When you speak constantly, people learn to ignore you. The leader who speaks at every meeting trains their team to discount their input as background noise. The one who speaks only when they have something essential to contribute commands immediate attention the moment they open their mouth. This principle applies to all forms of communication. The fewer words you use to express an idea, the more powerful that expression becomes. Brevity is not just the soul of wit, it is the essence of authority. Emotional restraint means maintaining composure regardless of provocation, not because you are suppressing feelings, but because you have integrated them so thoroughly that external circumstances cannot hijack your internal state. The person who reacts emotionally to every slight, responds angrily to every challenge, shows excitement at every opportunity, is teaching others that they can be manipulated through emotional triggers. Machiavelli understood that the prince who could not master his own emotional responses would inevitably be controlled by those who learned to trigger those responses strategically. The one who maintains equanimity communicates something far more powerful. Here is someone who cannot be destabilized, who will not be pulled off course by emotional manipulation, who remains dangerous precisely because they remain calm. Strategic restraint means not taking every opportunity, not responding to every provocation, not engaging with every challenge. The fighter who throws every punch telegraphs their patterns and exhausts their energy. The one who waits for the perfect opening delivers devastating effect with minimal expenditure. This patience, this capacity to refrain from action when action is available but not optimal, signals a level of discipline and strategic thinking that generates respect and caution in equal measure. It communicates that you are playing a longer game than others realize, that you see patterns they miss, that you are dangerous, not because you act constantly, but because you act decisively when the moment is right. The restraint that generates power differs fundamentally from the restraint that comes from fear or weakness. Fearful restraint comes from inability. You do not speak because you are afraid of judgment. You do not act because you are paralyzed by doubt. You do not reveal yourself because you fear rejection. Power restraint comes from choice. You do not speak because silence serves you better. You do not act because timing is not optimal. You do not reveal yourself because mystery enhances your influence. Others sense this difference immediately, even if they cannot articulate it. The restraint of fear diminishes you. The restraint of power elevates you. Machiavelli would point to historical examples of rulers who understood this principle. They did not explain their reasoning to subordinates who needed only to execute commands. They did not justify their decisions to subjects who needed only to obey them. They did not reveal their strategies to allies who needed only to understand their role in implementing them. This restraint was not secrecy for its own sake, but strategic information management that maintained their position at the center of power. The moment you must explain yourself, you have acknowledged that authority rests not in your judgment, but in others' understanding of your judgment. And that acknowledgement shifts the balance of power away from you. The cultivation of power through restraint transforms your relationship with action itself. You move from compulsive doing to conscious choosing, from reactive responding to strategic engaging, from scattered activity to focused impact. This transformation makes you far more effective precisely because you are doing less. Your energy, attention, and resources concentrate on objectives that matter rather than dissipating across activities that merely fill time. Others perceive this focus as power because they see someone who knows what they want, has clarity about how to achieve it, and possesses the discipline to ignore distractions that would divert someone less centered from their purpose. The sixth revelation concerns how you can know whether you have achieved that singular level where your power operates silently, how you can distinguish genuine internal sovereignty from its counterfeit versions. Machiavelli understood that true power reveals itself not in favorable circumstances, but in adversity, not when fortune smiles, but when conditions turn hostile, not in moments of triumph, but in experiences of loss. The test of silent power comes when everything external that you thought supported your authority disappears, when the recognition vanishes, when the position ends, when the relationship dissolves, when the status evaporates. What remains when everything external falls away is the truth of what you actually are. Consider what happens to most people when they lose external markers of power. The executive whose identity was wrapped in their title experiences existential crisis when they retire or are fired. The professional whose sense of worth came from their expertise faces devastation when that expertise becomes obsolete. The individual whose power derived from physical attractiveness spirals into depression as age claims that advantage. These collapses reveal that their power was never truly theirs. It was borrowed from circumstances they did not control and could not maintain. When the external supports disappeared, nothing internal remained to sustain them because they had never developed true sovereignty. The individual who has achieved silent power responds differently to such reversals. Their fundamental sense of self, their internal authority, their psychological stability does not depend upon external circumstances and therefore cannot be removed by changes in those circumstances. They may grieve the loss, acknowledge the change, adjust their strategies, but their core remains intact because it was never dependent upon what fortune provided or removed. This is the ultimate test. Do you remain who you are, regardless of what you have, regardless of what others think of you, regardless of what circumstances deliver? If your power evaporates when externals change, it was never power, it was privilege. And privilege is always vulnerable to fortune's reversal. Machiavelli observed that the princes who endured were those who could lose everything material and still retain their essential authority, their command over themselves, their strategic clarity. They had cultivated something within themselves that transcended circumstance, a core of sovereignty that no external force could touch because it did not depend upon external conditions for its existence. This is the difference between borrowed power, which circumstances can grant and revoke, and authentic power, which you develop through internal work and therefore can never be taken from you. The borrowed power may appear greater in favorable conditions, but authentic power proves superior precisely because it remains constant regardless of conditions. Another test of silent power emerges in how you handle success rather than failure. Many people can maintain composure in adversity but lose themselves in triumph, becoming arrogant, careless, disconnected from the discipline that generated their success in the first place. They allow favorable circumstances to convince them that they no longer need the practices that built their power, that their success proves they have transcended the necessity for continued internal work. This is perhaps the most dangerous trap, because it appears as validation when it is actually the beginning of decline. Machiavelli saw countless examples of leaders whose success became the seed of their destruction, not because success itself destroyed them, but because they interpreted success as permission to abandon the principles that created it. The person who has achieved true silent power responds to success and failure with equal equanimity, not because they do not care about outcomes, but because their internal state is not hostage to external results. They can celebrate victory without becoming intoxicated by it, absorb defeat without being devastated by it, receive praise without believing it, endure criticism without internalizing it. This psychological stability does not come from indifference, but from having done the profound work of separating their sense of self from the endless fluctuations of circumstance. They have achieved what Machiavelli called virtue, an internal quality of excellence that expresses itself regardless of what fortune delivers. The practical test you can apply to yourself involves examining your responses to various scenarios. When someone disrespects you, does rage arise automatically, or can you choose your response? When someone praises you, does your sense of worth inflate, or does it remain stable? When someone disagrees with you, do you feel compelled to convince them, or can you hold your perspective without requiring their agreement? When opportunity appears, do you react with desperate hunger, or can you evaluate it calmly? When threat emerges, does fear drive your choices, or can you assess strategically? Your honest answers to these questions reveal whether you have achieved silent power or are still dependent upon external circumstances for internal stability. The ultimate measure, however, lies in whether you feel the need to measure at all. The individual still concerned with proving their power, with comparing themselves to others, with tracking their progress against external standards, has not yet transcended the need for validation that silent power requires releasing. When you have truly arrived at that singular level, you know it not because you passed tests, but because tests cease to matter. You are no longer trying to become powerful. You are simply expressing the power you have cultivated through years of internal work. And that expression occurs naturally, effortlessly, silently, without any need to announce itself or prove itself to anyone, including to yourself. The seventh and final revelation concerns what becomes possible when you operate from that singular level of silent power, and how this transformation extends beyond your individual existence to touch everything you encounter. Machiavelli understood that true power serves purposes larger than the individual who wields it. That authority finds its justification not in the benefits it provides its possessor, but in what that possessor does with it. The prince, who seeks power for its own sake, who desires authority simply to feel superior to others, who wants influence merely to satisfy ego, has missed the point entirely. Silent power emerges not as a goal, but as a byproduct of becoming someone capable of serving purposes that transcend personal gratification. When you achieve genuine internal sovereignty, when you cultivate authentic needlessness, when you develop the capacity for strategic restraint, you become capable of contributions that were impossible in your previous state. You can speak uncomfortable truths because you do not need to be liked. You can make difficult decisions because you are not paralyzed by fear of criticism. You can hold unpopular positions because you do not require consensus to maintain your internal stability. You can take bold action because you have liberated yourself from the need for guarantee of success. This freedom transforms what you can offer the world, shifting you from someone who needs to take from circumstances to someone who can give to them. Machiavelli observed that the leaders who left lasting legacies were those who used their power not primarily for self-aggrandizement, but in service of visions that outlived them. They built institutions that endured beyond their personal reign. They established principles that guided generations after their death. They created value that compounded across time rather than consuming everything in the present for immediate gratification. This orientation required the very qualities that silent power develops: the ability to delay gratification, to invest in outcomes they might not personally witness, to plant trees under whose shade they would never sit. Such long-term orientation becomes possible only when you have transcended the desperate neediness that demands immediate payoff for every action. The impact of your silent power radiates through every relationship and interaction. People in your presence feel something shift within themselves, not because you are trying to change them, not because you are imposing your will, but because your own internal sovereignty gives them permission to access their own. Your needlessness allows them to drop their performance. Your restraint creates space for their authentic expression. Your stability provides anchor when their world destabilizes. This influence operates wordlessly, unconsciously, inevitably. You become a kind of catalyst that accelerates transformation in others, simply by embodying the transformation yourself. Consider how this operates in practical terms. The parent who has achieved silent power does not need to control their children through fear or manipulation. Their children naturally respect boundaries because they sense the unshakable core in their parent. The leader who operates from this level does not need to micromanage because their team members rise to meet the standard they embody rather than the standard they demand. The teacher who possesses this quality does not need to force learning because students are drawn to the depth they sense and want to access it for themselves. In each case, influence flows naturally from being rather than from doing, from presence rather than from pressure. Machiavelli would recognize in this description the highest expression of political virtue, the kind of leadership that does not merely command obedience but inspires genuine loyalty, that does not simply extract compliance but generates commitment, that creates not followers who need constant direction, but new leaders who carry forward principles they have made their own. This multiplication of leadership, this expansion of sovereignty beyond the individual into the collective, represents power achieving its ultimate purpose. You have not merely become powerful, you have become a source from which others can develop their own power. The cultivation of silent power thus transforms from personal development into something approaching spiritual practice. You are engaging in an alchemical process that transmutes the base metal of ego-driven striving into the gold of authentic sovereignty. Each time you catch yourself seeking validation and choose internal stability instead, you strengthen the foundation of your power. Each time you feel the impulse to over-explain and choose restraint instead, you deepen your authority. Each time you notice neediness arising and consciously cultivate sufficiency instead, you expand your freedom. These small choices, repeated consistently across months and years, accumulate into a fundamental transformation of who you are and how you move through the world. The paradox completes itself when you realize that achieving silent power requires releasing the desire for power itself. As long as you pursue it for what it will get you, for how it will make you feel, for the advantages it will provide, you remain trapped in neediness that prevents its achievement. Silent power emerges only when you do the internal work for its own sake. When you pursue sovereignty because living any other way has become intolerable. When you cultivate needlessness, not as strategy, but as genuine preference. At that point, power arrives not as something you acquire, but as something you discover was always there, waiting for you to stop chasing it long enough to notice its presence within yourself all along. You stand now at a threshold that Machiavelli himself would recognize, that place where understanding transforms into decision, where knowledge awaits implementation, where the map you have been given must either guide your journey or become merely another collection of words that entertained your intellect but changed nothing in your actual existence. The teaching you have received concerns that singular level of consciousness where power operates silently, where influence flows without announcement, where authority commands through presence rather than performance. But understanding this principle differs entirely from embodying it, and embodiment requires something most people perpetually postpone: the courage to begin the uncomfortable work of transformation today, in this moment, regardless of whether conditions feel optimal or readiness seems complete. The internal sovereignty that generates silent power does not arrive as sudden revelation or mystical gift. It emerges through consistent practice of choosing your response rather than reacting automatically, of questioning your needs rather than serving them blindly, of restraining impulse rather than indulging every urge toward expression or action. Each small choice either builds the foundation of genuine authority or reinforces patterns of neediness that keep you dependent upon external validation. Machiavelli understood that character forms through accumulated decisions, that the prince you become tomorrow is determined by the choices you make today, that there is no moment when the work is complete, because every moment presents another opportunity to either strengthen or diminish your sovereignty. The question is not whether you will face these choice points, but whether you will recognize them and respond consciously when they arrive. Consider what changes in your life if you truly internalize this teaching. The relationships that currently drain you through endless cycles of seeking approval and fearing rejection transform when you release the need for specific outcomes from them. The professional situations that generate anxiety because your worth feels tied to performance or recognition shift when you locate your value internally rather than deriving it from external achievement. The social dynamics that exhaust you through constant performance and positioning dissolve when you stop playing games you never needed to play. This is not withdrawal or isolation. It is liberation into more authentic engagement, precisely because that engagement no longer serves the desperate agenda of proving yourself, maintaining image, or extracting validation from unwilling participants in your psychological drama. The work ahead requires brutal honesty about where you currently operate from neediness, where ego still drives choices you tell yourself are strategic, where fear masquerades as prudence, where the desire for approval shapes decisions you pretend are based on principle. This self-examination cannot be comfortable because comfort has been your prison, the familiar patterns that keep you trapped in cycles of seeking power from sources that can never provide it. Machiavelli offers you a different path, one walked by those rare individuals who refused to settle for borrowed authority and instead cultivated the real thing within themselves. But this path demands you relinquish the consolations that keep most people exactly where they are. The comfort of blaming circumstances, the safety of conforming to expectations, the temporary pleasure of external validation that provides just enough reward to prevent you from seeking something deeper. The choice before you could not be more clear. You can acknowledge the truth of what you have learned, feel momentarily inspired by its wisdom, then return to the same patterns that have governed your life until this moment. Telling yourself you will implement these principles later when conditions improve or when you feel more ready. Or you can recognize that this moment, right now, offers the same opportunity for transformation that every moment offers. and that postponing the work is itself a choice that reinforces the patterns of powerlessness you claim to want to transcend. Silent power awaits you not in some future state of readiness, but in the decision to begin cultivating internal sovereignty immediately with whatever resources you currently possess, from whatever position you currently occupy, regardless of how far the destination may seem from your present location. If this teaching has resonated with something deep within you, if you sense the truth in Machiavelli's understanding of power's real nature, if you recognize yourself in the patterns of neediness and borrowed authority that keep most people perpetually seeking what they already possess the capacity to develop, then honor that recognition with action. Press the button that signals this content provided value you want to preserve and revisit. Share this perspective with someone whose life would benefit from understanding where authentic power actually originates. Subscribe to this channel not as passive consumer, but as active participant in a community dedicated to the uncomfortable work of genuine transformation rather than the comfortable illusions of superficial self-improvement. And most importantly, leave a comment sharing your own insights about where you recognize neediness operating in your life and what specific practice you commit to implementing today to begin cultivating the internal sovereignty that generates silent power. Your contribution enriches this space for everyone who arrives here seeking wisdom rather than comfortable lies about the nature of authority and influence.